here. I come home exhausted, and you're just lounging around sleep.
My husband is the worst. Even when I'm burning up with fever, he tries to push me to do all the housework. If I collapse and end up in the hospital, he just thinks I'm faking it. How did I ever let myself be pushed around by a man like this for so long? As I started preparing for a divorce, tragedy struck. Life had always been tough, and it felt like more trials were coming my way. But I won't be defeated. I vowed to myself that I'd overcome anything thrown my way. My name is Susie, 52 years old. I'm a part-time working housewife. We started living with my in-laws shortly after getting married, but since their passing, it's just me and my husband, Jason. We have an adult daughter, Droll, but she moved out and we rarely see her. Having Avril was a blessing, but marrying Jason was a mistake. In our 50s, I've come to realize it's too late. Still, I plan to wait a bit more and get a divorce when Jason retires at 65. That's because I've endured years of harassment from my in-laws and grown tired of Jason's constant complaints. Yes, what we had wasn't a marriage, but a mere coexistence. I never viewed Jason as family, nor did I want to spend my golden years with him. During a family trip, both my in-laws tragically passed away in an accident. At the memorial service, I unintentionally overheard some relatives whispering in a corner, thinking I was out of earshot. It hit me then that people pitied me. I always thought it was normal for a daughter-in-law to obey the in-laws. My mom even told me, getting along and not resisting leads to a happy family. You'll be in the mother-in-law's position someday. Just be patient. But I was treated like a maid, mainly because I never gave birth to a boy. I always believed that someday freedom would come my way. I never imagined people felt sorry for me. Then I realized I wanted to live a happier life and had so many things left to do. If I brought up divorce now, Jason, who never loved me, would agree in a heartbeat. He'd make sure the assets weren't divided fairly, and I'd be left on my own. I don't want to burden my daughter, who's single and working hard. And since I've never worked full-time, starting now would be a tough transition. Thankfully, Jason is a workaholic who's climbed his way up to an executive position. I'm sure he'll receive a hefty retirement package when he leaves. I decided to take half of that and divorce him. I have about 13 years until he retires at 65, so I started looking for a job I can do from home and began taking computer classes between house chores. Jason is often away for work, but when he returns, it's always a dinner, or bière, with short commands for me to serve him. He would never notice if I'm doing something behind his back. To document the deterioration of our relationship, I decided to keep a diary. Then one day, I felt terribly ill and was bedridden. When Jason came home and saw me in bed, he yelled, "What are you doing?" "I come home tired, and you're just lying there," and forcibly pulled me up. "I have a high fever. I can't make dinner. If I do, I might get you sick. There's leftover food in the fridge. Please warm it up." Jason's face twisted in anger. "Wait. You expect me to eat leftovers? You can still move with a fever, right? You're living comfortably because I'm working." He dragged me out of bed and ordered me to cook. Feeling cold and shaky, I managed to make some food. I couldn't taste anything because of my stuffy nose, but I assumed it was all right. However, Jason complained after one bite, "This is awful. Did you even taste it? Just add some seasoning if it's not to your liking. It's way too sweet. You mixed up sugar and salt, didn't you? If that's the case, just eat the leftovers." Even with my foggy mind, I tried to do what I could, but Jason seemed annoyed. "Don't feed me the same stuff from yesterday. Did you mess up the sugar and salt?"
Did you mess up the sugar and salt on purpose, just to annoy Manny?
I wouldn't do that.
Then don't screw up the next dish. Turn it up, you.
He glared at me threateningly, ordering with a loud voice. I reluctantly began making another meal. But with the fever and throbbing headache, my hands weren't steady and I accidentally dropped a pot. I felt cold water splash on my feet and the shock made me collapse. And just like that, I lost consciousness. When I came to, I was lying in a hospital bed. Bella and my parents were there, tears glistening in their eyes as they watched over me.
What happened?
Lost in my confusion, my mother began to explain. I collapsed in the kitchen, and Jason had just left me there without even calling an ambulance. The next morning, Avril, who came home unexpectedly to surprise me, found me lying on the kitchen floor and immediately called for help. And with tears streaming down her face and a deep intensity in her eyes, Avril said, You really shouldn't be with Dad any longer. Just come live with me.
Where's Jason?
He's terrible. After you got hospitalized, I called him. He thought you were faking it and just left you. I can't believe he's my dad. Hearing my daughter's words, the reality of enduring this life for over a decade sunk in. I once thought that 10 years would pass quickly, but wasting those years in agony seemed like I'd just be squandering my life.
I've been planning to divorce Jason, but after what happened, I don't want to spend another second with him.
Seeing this, Trio finally smiled.
I done Dad Benson gently. You should do that. If you're ever in need, you can always come home. Everyone told us how hard it's been for you. I am sorry we didn't realize sooner.
I'm so sorry. This might be my fault. I told you that, no matter what, you should endure for the sake of the family. You took my advice seriously and bore everything, didn't you? I truly apologize. I wish I told you at least once that if things got tough, you could always come back home.
I replied, I should have spoken up when things got tough too. This happened because I never confided in anyone. From now on, I'm going to live a life without regrets. Seeing my smile, everyone in the room shared a gentle moment of laughter. The days of being controlled by Jason were over. And from now on, I'll chase my own happiness. But just before Avril and my parents left my hospital room, my mother, with a concerned look, asked Susie, "You look pale. Have you had a health checkup recently?" I shook my head. Although Jason's insurance covers checkups, I hadn't had one in years due to my busy schedule. I'd never really thought about whether I was in good health or not. I just hadn't given it much attention. Maybe I should get one, I mused, realizing I didn't even know my own health status. Deciding to stay in the hospital for one more night, I scheduled a health checkup and headed home. Surprisingly, Kristen was there that evening and immediately yelled at me when I entered.
Where been? The accused. Us in the hospital. Bring this before I can catch him. Didn't Avril tell you? He probably had real life for you while you went out with some stranger. I heard someone saw a woman who looks just like you with a man I've never seen.
Caught off guard by the baseless accusation, I was a bit slow to react. What are you talking about? I've no idea what you mean. People who look like me could be anywhere. I've been in the hospital. You can check with them if you want. Look, I have the paperwork from the hospital right here.
It's her modeling. I can tell you're flustered.
Anyone would be flustered if they were accused of something they didn't do. This document proves it. I pulled out the paperwork I had received from the hospital from my bag, but Jason snatched it from my hands, tore it up, and threw it on the floor.
Anyone can fake those papers.
This was getting nowhere. Feeling defeated, I immediately ran out of the house. Jason didn't follow me. I hailed a taxi on the main road and headed to my parents' home. It was a relief being in the same city. A while after settling at home, my dad retrieved some clothes I had left behind, and I decided to stay with them for a bit. With everything that had transpired, I even considered treating myself to a vacation once the divorce was finalized. But that was until the results of my medical examination were out. Not long after returning home, I went back to the hospital for the results. They said I needed more detailed tests. I thought it was nothing serious, but then the doctor called in my family, and in a somber atmosphere, my dad relayed what he had been told. They said it's terminal cancer. You can have only 3 months to live. Oh, I see. Just when I had decided to enjoy the rest of my life. I received this grim prognosis. While I recognized the gravity of the words, they didn't quite sink in. I was simply in shock. My mother hugged me, weeping, while my father looked away. At that moment, Avril held both my hands tightly. Just because it's terminal doesn't mean it's incurable. Medicine has advanced so much. I want you to experience more happiness. I want to see you smiling every day. Don't give up just because you've been given this prognosis. Avril's words were encouraging and gave me strength. The reason they told you about the diagnosis is that they wanted you to fight. If you just withered away without knowing, you'd definitely regret it. Even though times are tough now, I believe the future will be brighter. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair to you. Though Avril tried to remain strong, she couldn't hold back her tears by the end. Knowing that my loved ones would grieve if I succumbed to my illness weighed heavily on me. Plus, I hadn't gotten back at Jason for everything he'd done. Fueled by a desire for revenge against Jason, I vowed to do whatever it took to beat the illness. That later, Avril told Jason about my condition and the terminal prognosis, but apparently he didn't believe her. My anger boiled up even more, thinking about a husband who didn't even bother to worry when his wife was in such a state. Why had I let Jason control me and tolerated him all these years? I regretted not divorcing him sooner, wondering if things would have been different. But I couldn't change the past. Determined to brighten my future, I decided to undergo the latest medical treatments. After living this way for 6 months, the 3-month prognosis had long passed and my health was improving. That day, I was at the hospital for a routine checkup, accompanied by my mother. Suddenly, my cell phone rang. It was a call from Jason, which was unusual. Seeing the caller ID, both my mother and I exchanged surprised glances. I chose not to answer, instead asking my mother to handle it in a particular way. While she hesitated, the call ended, but soon after, Jason called again. "Mom, please." When I suggested that, my mother hesitantly answered the phone. As to ensure I could hear Jason's voice, she plugged in earbuds, and we each used one.
The moment the call connected, Earth, I shout, "Where are you messing around? I knew we're faking the hospital stay. Always playing psych. Get out of there and come home now." His yelling was so loud and harsh that I wanted to pull out the earbud immediately.
My mother, using a stern tone, began, "I'm Susie's mother and—"
He sounded genuinely shocked. "Wait, station with where Tim? Ask to see his mom."
It would have been a blessing if she were just playing sick. She passed away earlier.
No, wait. You're lying too? Ask to shout frown.
My daughter, she's no longer in this world.
My mother, although initially hesitant, gave a very convincing performance of grief.
Jason fell silent for a few moments, then whispered, Where is Susie right now? Armed.
She told him the name of the hospital and hung up. We then alerted my father, Cheryl, and other relatives to gather in my room, anticipating Jason's arrival. Given Jason's prominent position at his company, we didn't expect him to arrive immediately. Besides, my father and Avril relatives from Jason's side of the family came as well. Because I had always been genuinely supportive during New Year's and summer holidays, they were quick to rally behind me.
When Jason finally stormed into the room, furious he yelled, "I heard you died, but the receptionist told me you're still admitted." When Jason finally stormed into the room, furious he yelled, "I heard you died, but the receptionist told me you're still admitted here."
At the reception desk, it seemed he learned that I was still alive and found out my room number. He appeared furious, feeling deceived, but he suddenly toned it down upon seeing the relatives present. I'd called the relatives as a buffer against Jason, who cares about public perception. If they hadn't been there, he might have verbally abused or even harmed me for lying. I'm grateful to those who came to support me.
Tim thought I'd heard Susie pass away. Where?
He said hesitantly, so I responded first. I asked Mom to tell you that. Without such drastic measures, you'd continue to think I'm just faking my illness, wouldn't you? Telling your suffering wife to come home and do housework. How could you? Then Avril, with a look of contempt, addressed Jason.
Dad, how'd you believe Mom wasn't faking? She was told she only had 3 months to live, but she promised to stay alive until the divorce. And I'm really fought hard, and...
Divorce application.
I thrust forward the divorce papers my father had gotten from the office.
Please grant me this divorce. It's my final request to you. I don't want to die as your wife. You hate me that much? Tell me, did you ever do a single thing that would make me like you?
I brought money. You lived comfortably, didn't you?
Please, don't make me laugh. I didn't marry money. I wanted a relationship where we could support each other. Tell me clearly, that wasn't possible with you. My biggest regret is not divorcing you sooner. Now sign it.
I asserted firmly, and the relatives backed me up. It's all because you've made Susie suffer for so long. That is the consequence of your actions. Can't you grant your wife's last wish? Other relatives began to scold Jason in turn.
I'm struggling without Susie. I've never done housework, so our home's a mess. I can't manage our finances either. I spend too much tea. Sissy was only pretending. I'm genuinely sorry.
Listen with tears in his eyes, signed the divorce papers.
I don't want to see your face for another second. Leave now.
I demanded, and a dejected Jason left. Later, with the help of my lawyer, I successfully secured half of her assets. Regarding the long-time harassment from my in-laws, I claimed that Jason was complicit by turning a blind eye, and I demanded compensation. Though the evidence was scant and I couldn't claim much, I still managed about $10,000, which felt satisfactory. What's valuable to me isn't money, but living freely without anyone's control. They thinking I was dying. Jason, mistakenly thinking I was dying soon, was furious about the compensation claim. But I had already been discharged from the hospital and moved near Afriel's apartment with my parents, so he couldn't find me. It turns out, Jason tried to sue me through my lawyer, alleging that I had an affair and demanding compensation from me. However, it became clear that the day Jason's acquaintance claimed to have seen me walking with an unknown man, I was in the hospital. When it was confirmed that the woman wasn't me, my lawyer promptly dismissed Jason's accusations. After that, Jason was ostracized by the entire family, and even Avril cut ties with him. Like with no one to turn to, he apparently resorted to hiring a housekeeper. But hiring housekeeping isn't cheap, and Jason started looking for a wife who'd do the chores for less. He tried wooing his housekeepers during work hours and even made unexpected marriage proposals, leading him to be flagged as a person of concern by staffing agencies. Rumors spread that a housekeeper had sued Jason, and the scandal hit company heavily reduced his severance pay and fired him. Now he seems to be working part-time, just making ends meet. My treatment went well. The metastasized tumors almost disappeared, and the primary tumor vanished. I started thinking about the future, focusing on doing everything I wanted, and my days became positive, bright, and fulfilling. But currently, I'm working remotely on tasks like data entry. I started preparations, anticipating the need to care for my aging parents in the future. Avril met someone wonderful and came to introduce him. My parents and I were overjoyed, having been through my own challenges and come out the other side. I could say this with confidence. Next, now, while hoping for Avriel's happiness, I aim to live each day with joy and positivity,